Hey, welcome back everyone. It is now the middle of October of 2022, and not only are we getting closer to other shows out there like Tales of the Jedi, the Star Wars Ahsoka series, Mando Season 3, and a whole lot more on the horizon, but also we have Star Wars Celebration of 23 that's going to actually offer a lot of big announcements that will lend itself to the roadmap of the Star Wars universe. This is Mike Zero. Make sure to subscribe if you're new to the channel for future Star Wars updates. Also, by the way guys, make sure to drop a thumbs up on this video to support the channel. I thank you all so very much for the kind support. It is greatly appreciated. Now, one thing about the new universe between George, John, and Dave Filoni is the fact that they are all actively getting involved in really dragging in Star Wars Legends, and this is something that a lot of fans are very excited about. And for those of you that are unaware about what Legends really is, it is going to be a very exciting time for Star Wars fans out there, because that, of course, is all lined up with the authentic side of the Star Wars universe. So given that they are dragging in a lot of aspects like that, and what Favreau is currently up to, there's a lot of things that they are also beginning to work on when it comes to everything with of course changing the Skywalker saga and creating all of these different retcons and changes. And Favreau's been a lot more talkative recently. He's been a lot more vocal about his plans for the future of the franchise, where it's going, how involved it really is, how tough of a job it really is at this point in time. I mean, there's a lot of things that Favreau has been talking about, and most recently has a lot to do with changing and erasing sequel trilogy canon and lore, and exactly what it really is going to entail. Now, with that being said, alright, now, with many new Star Wars TV shows currently in the works by Disney and Lucasfilm, creators John and Dave are beginning to work on very difficult jobs to turn things around for the franchise. Now, it's noted that currently Favreau and Filoni are getting ready to create a major retcon for the sequel trilogy movies that will change everything and how fans view those movies by Disney. Now, in a recent interview with Favreau, he was questioned about retcons and what it means for the sequels. Favreau stated the following to the fans: "So, it's great you asked me this, because with us focusing so much on Legends now and bringing back all of these beloved storylines that the dedicated fans cherish, we are in the process of making some sacrifices to some of the existing lore that both J.J. Abrams and Rian Johnson had put out there with their films. We already had contacted them in a meeting remotely, and we discussed it all with those over at Disney and Lucasfilm, and they were perfectly fine with the changes that we are about to make." Now, let me just pause here quick for a second before Favreau gets into the real meat of all of this. Now, of course, this is where the rubber meets the road. This is where things are finally beginning to move. Now, obviously, you can see where Favreau and Filoni are coming from, is that they are essentially pretty much, making it very clear to both Rian Johnson and J.J. Abrams about what they're about to do, and how substantial and how dramatic these changes are really going to be toward the sequel trilogy films. Now, we already talked about how they're completely changing Rey's bloodline, her backstory, her actual name, and stuff around those lines, of making her connected to the Kenobi bloodline mixed with Palpatine's, and how that's really going to lend itself to more stories to be told. So this was all brought up, alright? All these changes coming our way for the sequels were brought up to both Rian and JJ, and they were fine with it. And you know what? When they actually present it like that, where they're fine with it so much, I think it just goes to show us that they never really cared about everything right from the get-go. The fact that they're giving things up so easily and saying, alright, John, Dave, you know what? Do what you want, do what you gotta do, and just, modify some things. So that's what John and Dave are up to right now, and that's what they're pretty much caught in the middle of. They're really building this world and building this franchise from the ground up, and that's what the Mandoverse, as the fans like to coin it as, because the Mandoverse, all this post-Return of the Jedi stuff, is essentially creating a new sequel trilogy verse, if you will, that's gonna dip its way into the official sequel trilogy and change many things, and Favreau's confirming a lot of that. Now, Favreau goes on to continue and state the following as well: Now, in order for us to tell our story correctly, it's going to take erasing some of the lore that you see in the sequels, some of which will be pretty substantial, but we want to make it authentic and true, where it feels just right. We are not here to erase the lore just for the sake of it, but rather it's because we have some grand plan and amazing canon coming your way that is going to deeply cut into the sequels and change things around quite dramatically. I really can't say much on that, unfortunately, but hang in there because we think fans who grew up with the Legends lore are going to be absolutely thrilled to see what we have in store and how it's going to greatly impact the last 3 films that were put out for fans. So, obviously, Favreau is making it very clear here as well, once again, that there's a lot of work being put into this, a lot of changes are being presented to the sequel trilogy movies and how it's being shifted around when it comes to the lore and such. Now, before I get to the next thing about what Favreau actually has to say also is that Favreau is a very passionate creator. He knows what he's doing, he knows what the fans want, and basically shifting around the lore of the sequel trilogy, you know, he's got to do this very carefully to make sure that it makes a lot of sense, and he's said this before in the past. Now, given that Favreau is currently writing a Boba Fett Season 2, Mandalorian Season 4, and of course other spin-off shows and other new shows alike, Favreau and Filoni are also gearing up on focusing on brand new eras as well, in order to really, you know, tap into the potential that they have when it comes to Star Wars, one of which being the Old Republic, another of which being a post-Episode 9 series, and we talked about that as well. So, on to the next thing here, alright? We already know that Favreau has been talking about Grogu's true identity and how that's going to be a big impact also on the sequel trilogy and all of the Skywalker Saga films. So let that sink in for a moment, alright? So you have the sequel trilogy lore that's going to be impacted by the reveal of Grogu's true identity and who he really is, where he comes from, and that's just one little piece, alright? That's just one piece of the puzzle of all the changes that they are making to this timeline. Now, obviously there's a lot of things to wonder about because a lot of fans have been very much invested in what's going on with the sequel trilogy lore, you know, exactly what they're going to be doing, and we talked about some of that. There's a lot of things that are being poured into all of this that needs to be laid out very carefully. Now, Kathleen Kennedy, for those of you that aren't aware, she did not approve at all over any of this, not a surprise. She's still having issues with the Acolyte series after John and Dave especially left. You know, they tried to fix some aspects, but it didn't work out with them. They wanted to leave. So there's a lot of things going on over at Lucasfilm. You know, there's a lot of ups and downs, and they're just trying to create now a consistent flow of successful Star Wars TV shows in order to really convince the fans that Star Wars is back in action and it's thriving and surviving. That's Favreau and Filoni's goal for 2023, to make a consistent amount of Star Wars shows. Bad Batch 2, Mando 3, Ahsoka, just for starters. Skeleton Crew by Kathleen Kennedy, I'm not really all that, invested in that because of what we've been hearing about that show. We'll talk about that a little bit later. But overall, guys, let me know what you guys have to say about all of this below in the comments. And if you guys did enjoy the content for today, make sure to drop a thumbs up on this video to support the channel. I thank you all so very much for the kind support, and I'll catch you guys next time.